Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, we're diving straight in today for a truly mind-bending journey. We are going to look at the very architecture of life itself, and we're going to connect dots you probably didn't even know existed. We'll travel from the microscopic structure of water inside your individual human cells, zoom way out to the soil beneath our feet, and then look at the macro level of global farming. Trust me, by the end of this, the way you look at a simple glass of water, your backyard, and even the daily news you consume, it's fundamentally going to change.
Okay, let's dive into this first concept, because it completely flips the script on what we've been taught about hydration. What if drinking pure water isn't actually hydrating you? If you just chug a glass of perfectly pure liquid water, well, it might feel refreshing for a minute, but because it lacks the structure to actually stay inside our cells, pure liquid water has no real reservoir in the human body. It basically just passes right through your bloodstream, hits your kidneys, and is out as urine in about 45 minutes.
To really wrap your head around this, think about Jell-O. When you make Jell-O, you watch this plain liquid magically transform into a solid, gel-like structure. What's actually happening there is the water is organizing itself into these complex crystal structures around proteins, and that is exactly how the human body holds water. The vast majority of the water making up the 70% of your body isn't a sloshing liquid pool, it's highly organized into a solid gel-like state.
We call this structured state crystalline water. Think of it as a gel-like cellular battery storage system. And this is where the biology gets absolutely fascinating. See, plants use their chlorophyll to capture solar energy, taking CO2 and turning it into these long carbon chain batteries. When we eat plants, we digest those carbon bonds and literally liberate that stored sunlight, that pure energy. Our biologic age, and honestly our ability to fight disease, depend entirely on our ability to hold this light within the crystalline water inside our cells.
So how do we actually measure this cellular vitality? Well, in clinical settings, it's measured by something called a phase angle, which is essentially a read on your cell's electrical charge and membrane health. An ideal, fully charged battery state of human health and cellular vitality is a phase angle of 10 to 12. But here's the crazy part. Even the absolute healthiest patients walking into a clinic today typically only measure around a 7 or an 8. We are quite literally chronically undercharged.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how terrifying that energy loss becomes when that phase angle drops to a 4. This is the exact measurement where cancer typically appears in the human body. When you look at the simple reality of water inside a cell, cancer isn't necessarily the beginning of a disease. It is actually one of the final symptoms of a complete energetic disconnect from plant life, chlorophyll, and sunlight.
Just a tiny bit below that, death occurs at a phase angle of 3.5. This sequence is a huge wake-up call. It shows us that chronic disease isn't just bad luck. It's a progressive, highly measurable loss of cellular energy and our failing ability to hold crystalline water. We are literally leaking our life force. So, the obvious massive question is, why is this happening to us right now?
To answer that, we have to look closely at a very specific window of time. Between 1992 and 2002, researchers witnessed a sudden, completely unexplained collapse of human health. We're talking across all ages, across all organ systems. Chronic disease just skyrocketed in a single decade. And this correlated perfectly with a profound, fundamental change in Western food systems and agriculture.
That systemic change brought us to this absolutely staggering number, 4 billion. That is the estimated number of pounds of glyphosate being sprayed annually into our soil and water systems worldwide. Glyphosate is the primary ingredient in over 90% of the world's weed killers. Almost overnight, it was just everywhere in our environment.
So the crucial point is what this chemical actually does inside your body. Glyphosate basically functions as a potent antibiotic. When it touches human cell systems, it dissolves the boundaries of human biology. It literally breaks down the communication between your cells. We've all heard of leaky gut, right? Well, this is leaky cells. Your energy and light literally leak out, causing profound cellular injury and leaving you totally unable to repair yourself. Normally, our bodies rely on something called the redox signaling system. You can think of this as a cellular distress network, a wireless communication grid made of tiny carbon snowflakes. Whenever a cell gets injured, it uses this exact network to send out an SOS call for repair. But because of chemical interference, our cells are losing these carbon snowflakes. They just can't communicate. In fact, cancer is actually just a single human cell that has accumulated 20,000 unrepaired genetic injuries simply because its communication towers were cut off.
Let's move to and see how this builds into the broader ecosystem.
For the longest time, we were taught to view the microbiome as this intense war zone of good bacteria fighting bad bacteria. That view is totally outdated. The modern scientific paradigm reveals there are actually no inherently bad bacteria. Instead, there are only healthy, coherent, diverse ecosystems or toxic, deadly monocultures. Healthy biodiversity is the matrix of health, while monoculture is the demise of life.
And get this, the ultimate microbiome isn't just sitting in your gut. It's the soil right beneath your feet. Just listen to this fact. A single teaspoon of soil has more organisms than there are humans on the entire planet, over 8 billion species interacting in one tiny scoop. The brilliant, complex ecosystem in our gut is intimately, directly connected to the living, breathing biodiversity of the soil we grow our food in.
But right now, we are treating that soil terribly. Chemical farming operates like an ICU on life support. Farmers wake up and ask, okay, what invasive weed or bug do I need to kill today? They rely on poison-tolerant, genetically modified seeds and basically just intravenously inject artificial nutrients into dead dirt. Now contrast that with regenerative agriculture. This is an entirely different movement, where farmers wake up and ask, how can I create more life, more biodiversity in this soil today?
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer absurdity of how we allocate our land. In the United States, we have 120 million acres of actual farmland. But look at that second number, 40 million acres of Kentucky bluegrass lawn. The American lawn is our third largest crop, and it is completely 100% useless for feeding our communities. We're just spraying it with chemicals to keep it looking artificially nice.
Because we waste so much land, and because our local topsoil is dead and heavily subsidized by artificial inputs, we've become completely dependent on a 3,000-mile supply chain. Our food travels thousands of miles just to get to us. It is a highly vulnerable, terrifyingly fragile system that is constantly teetering on the edge of collapse.
Just how fragile are we talking? Well, Los Angeles, a massive metropolis, has only a 3-day food supply on hand for its millions of residents. The pandemic taught us a really harsh lesson when grocery shelves suddenly went bare. Major cities across the developed world are essentially vulnerable islands. If an earthquake or some major disruption takes out a single highway system, we are literally just days away from a massive humanitarian crisis.
This definitely isn't a new concept, though. Franklin Delano Roosevelt once said, the future of every country is in their soil. He said that during the Dust Bowl, an era where poor farming practices decimated topsoils and literally left the nation starving. It's a really stark historical reminder that true homeland security doesn't start with military might. It literally begins in the dirt.
But there is incredible hope here, and it really starts with empowerment and reconnecting to nature. There's a massive regenerative agricultural movement happening right now, led predominantly by women and youth who are choosing to build community agriculture. And the best part? You can start right at home. Those dandelions you spent all your weekends trying to destroy, before they flower, those greens are actually edible anti-cancer powerhouses. You can plant beets and turnips and literally turn your yard into a bounty of safety and health.
And this whole concept of biodiversity goes way beyond physical soil. It applies directly to our minds, too. Think about it. If you consume a single 24/7 news source every day, whether that's CNN or Fox News, your mind essentially becomes a vulnerable monocrop. That monotonous input breeds a small box of fear and incredibly predictable beliefs. Conversely, actually immersing yourself in the awe and biological complexity of nature fosters diverse, resilient, and greatly expanded thinking.
So I want to leave you with this final, absolutely vital question. How will you cultivate biodiversity in your own soil today? Really think about your physical diet, the actual yard outside your window, and the mental inputs you consume every single day. You are just a few choices away from a universe of regeneration. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I highly encourage